Grocery is the largest undigitized retail format on the planet, and yet everybody around the world grocery shops once a week, once a month. Some cultures once a day. This is the most frequent consumer shopping behavior on the planet. And so there's a big gap when it comes to tech.
Seeing the food industry where you have passionate people working on things and the whole industry is digitizing, it's becoming e-commerce faster than ever. And the resources that you need to be the best e-commerce company are just inherently different. Like, you actually need data expertise, you need engineering, you need to be able to figure out solutions that can optimize your business. And that was just something that a lot of these folks, small business owners, didn't have like the time or the resources to do properly. And so, we looked at it and we're like, well, how can we bridge that gap, and how can we really use this data plus smart engineering to be able to allow these folks to grow their businesses in new ways and become the top performing digital companies, which every single restaurant across the country now is being asked to be.
Welcome to The Value of One, the Power of All, a podcast created by the Ron Brown Scholar Program. Since 1996, this organization has been investing in the next generation of African American leaders. And this podcast highlights the stories of the scholars, alumni, staff, and friends that make this program special. Hey everybody, this is Ray Pryor, 2015 Ron Brown Scholar, and you're in for a very special episode where you'll get to hear from not just one Ron Brown Scholar, but two. Brandon Hill from the class of 2011 and Colin Webb from the class of 2014. Brandon and Colin have a decent amount in common. They're both Ron Brown Scholars from nearby class years, both attended premier institutions for technology and engineering, Stanford and MIT, and they're both co-founders and CEOs of tech startups in the food industry that are based in California, and they both launched in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Brandon studied computer science at Stanford around the same time Colin was studying engineering at MIT, and both have taken the expertise they developed through their degrees and careers in tech and set out on a mission to revolutionize the food industry. Inspired by the entrepreneurial spirit and grit from their own family members, Brandon and Colin have built two platforms, Vori and Sauce, that aim to bring world-class technology to local grocery stores and restaurants so that they can make the same data-informed decisions that large corporations take for granted. Along the way, they learned a lot, from developing a deeper appreciation, respect, and empathy for the folks who make sure society is fed, iterating and ultimately finding product market fit, and raising their first series of VC funding. Here's that conversation, starting with Colin giving an overview of Sauce, and then Brandon giving a synopsis of Vori.
And it's incredible to be on this podcast with you. So super excited here and super excited to be able to chat with Brandon as well. So for us at Sauce, and I'm Colin, for us at Sauce, we help restaurants double their profit margins through smarter, more dynamic pricing strategies. So in a digital world where digital consumers are ordering via DoorDash and Uber, and they're ordering online via digital menu boards or QR codes in the restaurant, you can actually use data in a smarter way to help these restaurants better manage their revenue. So that's what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. And how long has Sauce been around for?
Yeah, we've been around for a little over 2 years now.
2 years. Okay, great. Awesome. Brandon, go ahead.
Hey, Ray, bro, thank you so much for having us. This is an honor for sure to be sitting amongst two giants here with you and Colin, and to be able to riff on the future, riff on the past, figure out how we can build together. I'm co-founder, CEO of Vori. I'm also RBS class of 2011. And, quick background before I talk about Vori. Originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, born and raised in the Midwest, and came out to study at Stanford. Was always passionate about the intersection of software and how we can use it to empower underserved communities and overlooked markets. It turns out that my parents have been in the grocery industry for over 40 years. In fact, my parents met and fell in love in a grocery store in upstate New York at the Price Chopper headquarters, which is a supermarket chain in Schenectady. And so their 3, 4, 5 decades of experience in the B2B grocery supply chain, working at companies that we all know, like Nabisco, which makes Oreos, and Kraft Heinz, and several others. My parents inspired us to start Vori. And so what is Vori? Vori, it kind of rhymes with sauce in a way in terms of its mission. So Vori helps supermarkets run their businesses more profitably and more efficiently by giving them an all-in-one platform to delight their shoppers, increase their sales, and manage their inventory. So the clearest way to think about what Vori is it's kind of like Square or Toast or Shopify, but for grocery stores, an all-in-one point-of-sale platform that allows the shoppers to check out. We've all checked out at a grocery store, so that's us. But it has all the really cool, really important back-of-house software as well that helps the grocery store waste less food, optimize its pricing, and control its inventory. So again, doubling the profitability of the grocery store. So that's what we do, and we're live in over. So we started 3 years ago. We have 600 live customers in California. We've gone through Y Combinator, and I'm co-founder with 2 really close friends of mine who we also met at Stanford University, 2 other young Black men. And we're on a mission to scale this nationwide.
That's awesome, Brandon. Thank you for sharing that. So both of you, Colin, you went to MIT, Brandon, you went to Stanford, and both of those schools are hubs for technological innovation. And I'm sure you both have been chewing on different ideas of how technology can transform the world, at least since then. But I imagine that the types of startups and companies that your classmates at both of those schools are talking about aren't necessarily about restaurants and about grocery stores. And so I'm just imagining in a classroom, or when you're having different case studies, that even you two, when you were in college thinking about what you wanted to do, you may not have thought about how you're going to help transform the people that help us get food, prepare food, cook food, and take care of themselves as they do so. So I'm curious, how did Brandon, for you, we can start with you, and I know a lot of it dates back to your family origins, but how did you come up with the idea of Vori? Can both of you share a little bit of a story on when was the light bulb that something like this needed to exist, and that you wanted to step in to be the person to make it happen?
Yeah, all credit goes to I'd say it takes a village to raise a startup, for sure. And so it wasn't just one light bulb moment that any one of my 3 co-founders popped out of bed one day. It was like, wow, we want to go and build technology for grocery stores. Love grocery stores, but I think the genesis, like I said, started with my parents. When I'm thinking of going back to early 2019, mid 2019, of course this was pre-pandemic. I just shut down one of my co-founders and I had just shut down a consumer social startup that we had done right out of school, and we were looking at what comes next. And I was choosing between, do I go to one of the big tech firms, and my heart was not in it, and I knew I wanted to try another at bat at entrepreneurship. And it's when my parents said, well, if you're not going to take the roles at the Uber, PM roles at Uber or Facebook, and the safe thing, you might as well go and target a industry that we think that you'll have a really strong chance of success in. And that's the one where we have been in the family trade for decades. Even my grandparents had convenience stores, grandparents, great aunts and uncles, on my mom's side in Oklahoma. And so this is a space that's not unfamiliar to my family. One of my older brothers is a merchandising exec at a publicly traded retailer, and so we have some of that DNA in the family, and it started to make sense. It's like, yeah, everybody. Grocery is the largest undigitized retail format on the planet, and yet everybody around the world grocery shops once a week, once a month. Some cultures once a day. So it's the most frequent consumer shopping behavior on the planet, and so there's a big gap when it comes to tech. So I think what ended up happening is a lot of our early customers, when we started to roll out our first solution, which was an order management tool that helped grocery stores order from all of their hundreds and hundreds of suppliers, just putting it on a single app on their phone, as opposed to moving them from pencil and paper and legacy fax machine solutions. We just gave them an app to order their inventory. That was the first thing we ever launched. It caught on really quickly, and I think from there our customers start to pull us deeper and deeper into more problems that they faced around the store beyond just ordering inventory. And so the long way to answer your question is it started with my parents, and then the market pulled us into the better part of the idea.
Yeah, family is important to me, and doing business with family is something I'm really passionate about. I was sharing with Colin a little while ago before we hopped on that we're starting a restaurant and here in the Dallas, Texas area. But I couldn't imagine doing it with anybody else. And a big reason why I think it's going to be successful is because of those relationships. And so I love that the origin for this is generational for you. Colin, switching over to you, can you share a little bit about when original ideas that ended up becoming sauce came to you, and a little bit of the story behind that?
Yeah, and I really appreciated Brandon's story. As you mentioned earlier, mine follow similar parallels. It really did start with family, and with me growing up in a family of small business entrepreneurs and seeing my mom and my uncle and my other like family friends just continue to start these brick and mortar type businesses, whether they be daycares, early educational childcare centers, like an ice cream shop my uncle started, whether it be like a vinyl shop for your cars, or whether it be like gyms and clothing stores and all of that. Like see my family start these types of businesses. Some of them succeeded, some of them didn't, but overall in every single case you had this extremely passionate group of people who would, literally be kind of passionate about the things they do, working really, really hard to achieve that. Bringing their kids in, like myself and my brothers, to go and help them. So, I'd be coming in on the weekends to go and like wash dishes or clean toilets and all of that. Right? It's like Brandon mentioned, it takes a village. And so, particularly pertaining to the food space, for me, it was a thing where, my co-founder and I had gone through MIT. We became engineers. I did fintech. I did self-driving cars. I did AI, and realized that, hey, we both come from this similar background of having family members in these like brick and mortar businesses, but then also seeing the food industry where you have passionate people working on things, and the whole industry is digitizing. It's becoming e-commerce, right? Faster than ever, and the resources that you need to be the best e-commerce company are just inherently different. Like, you actually need data expertise, you need engineering, you need to be able to figure out solutions that can optimize your business. And that was just something that a lot of these folks, small business owners, didn't have like the time or the resources to do properly. And so we looked at it and we're like, well, how can we bridge that gap, and how can we really use this data plus like smart engineering to be able to allow these folks to grow their businesses in new ways and become like the top performing digital companies, which every single restaurant across the country now is being asked to be. So
Yeah, that's powerful, Colin. I appreciate you sharing that. There's a one of my favorite books is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, and there's a chapter in it where he talks about uh, a generation of students, of college students whose parents and family members own those brick and mortar businesses that both of you talked about, and that some of them will go off and become PMs at Facebook, at uh, uh, at Microsoft, or at GM, or a lot of these big tech companies. Obviously, 20th century version of what that would be. And whereas the thesis of the author is that if they were to pour the genius and the resources that they pull from institutions like MIT, like Stanford, and pour them back into those brick and mortar businesses, those businesses, not just for the enterprise, but for their family, would be transformed for generations because they brought that knowledge back. And I feel like both of you did a version of that. Both of you could be at one of the big tech companies right now doing some amazing things. But you've chosen to build platforms that empower your family members and people like them, which I think is really inspiring. Was that thesis or that theme or that value? It's clear that it's part of who you are as people. Was that always what you thought that Vori and Sauce would be? Is a B2B tool that empowers restaurants or grocery stores, or did you think that there was something else in this space that you wanted for yourself or your company? I think it's just a powerful but both of your companies only do as well as your customers do, and the entire purpose of you existing is to help those people. So I'm wondering where I see the origins of those values, but I'm wondering, was that always part of the business model, or was that something that kind of evolved over time?
Yeah, I'm curious what Colin thinks, but I do think that we you really start to build the more time you spend with the with grocers, with the owners of these Leggett family owned businesses, with their employees, their stockers, their order clerks. You really develop this intense sense of empathy of what it takes to to keep a grocery store running, to keep a community fed, and to kind of crank the machinery that moves $800 billion worth of food every year. And it's quite intense. And you kind of realize there is a at least within grocery stores, I can be very specific. We are targeted at serving what we call independent grocery stores, which are, mom and pop. You call them mom and pop. You call them local. Our customers are immigrants from Mexico or from West Africa or from Eastern Europe, or just, fourth generation American, business owners that want to pass their grocery chain down to their kids. And they're very important institutions, whether it's DeLucchi's Market or Ava's Downtown Market, who named his, Juan named the store after his daughter Ava, or Molly Stone's. And it's really, really these guys doing great work, but competing against Walmart, Kroger, Whole Foods, Amazon, who have incredible leverage, massive capex into technology. And I think, when we first started out, we just honestly, before we wrote a single line, we would sit in the back office of grocery stores, just listening to their problems, walking the aisles, like looking at the selection, hearing their problems. And I think it kind of baptized us in like the sociocultural experience of like their lives. And then it's interesting, you start to actually, I think about this a lot, you actually can draw some non-obvious parallels between the experiences of small business owners, especially in the food space, and the experiences of African Americans, which is to always get the shortest end of the stick. So in the supply chain, small retailers actually get the worst pricing and the worst selection and the worst everything compared to the large chains. And I feel like, our people know that better than anybody, what it's like to get the worst selection, the worst access, the worst resources, the worst economics. You having to make a way out of no way. A lot of our grocery stores literally juggling 1,000 plates at one time, 30,000 products, dealing with hundreds of customers, dealing with very thin margins, but still having to is basically them and the hospitals were the only two institutions that were open during COVID. When the whole world was falling apart, grocery stores could not sleep. Grocery workers were essential, and nurses and doctors were essential, and basically the rest of the world went black. And it's like, in the crucible of emergency, I think Black people can relate to being the ones who are there to basically be like those in the infrastructure of society to keep everything afloat when everything's going crazy. So first, we just tried to operate in a space where we thought where we had some, family experience, and then it became, I think, about how can we level the playing field for these small businesses, but also seeing, just empathizing on like a personal level with their struggle across difference, because it's not like a lot of our grocery stores look like us. It is honestly mainly a older and whiter industry, and so it's very can be culture shock to see a young Black team walk in there trying to sell them technology, but we can still relate to many of the themes of their challenges based off of our ancestry, and so that has made the journey even more. Apart from it being a strong commercial opportunity, there's almost like a spiritual connection to it as well.
Yeah, that's amazing, Brandon. And I mean, it's it's awesome to hear about it. I'm sure it's probably nostalgic thinking back on those days when you were literally in the grocery store, walking down the aisles with your co-founders, trying to get a better sense of the problems that folks were facing. For us, we didn't necessarily spend a bunch of time like actually inside the restaurant, but we did see a couple of things that I would say, kind of guided us in this direction. First off, for us, we didn't start off doing dynamic pricing at all, and so we started off on the premise that everyone says it's either like 60% or 90% of small businesses fail within the first year, right? And so we started off saying, well, there's a bunch of data out there that is ever growing, ever present, and could potentially be used to allow us to make better decisions. Is there a way we can bring that 90% of businesses going out of business, small businesses going out of business, down to 0%? Is there a way that maybe that had something to do with like site selection and where you actually open shop? As Brandon mentioned, a lot of times like these small businesses, the people who start them are us. Like they're the immigrants from they're the immigrants from Mexico, they're the immigrants from Africa or Eastern Europe, or they're the folks trying to make a dream happen out of like the suburbs of Atlanta. And that was my family, right? Out of Atlanta, and they get the short end of the stick, right? It's harder to get capital, it's harder to get loaned, it's harder to get guidance, it's harder to get resources for anything that you're trying to do. And when my co-founder and I were looking at that, we were wondering, okay, is there a way to actually use data to kind of democratize that access to opportunity? A lot of the big companies, that Brandon mentioned, whether it's like your Walmarts or your Krogers, your gigantic companies, there, like they have gigantic partnerships and data engines that allow them to always know like where to open up a store, right? Like they spend billions of dollars on that. In the restaurant space, McDonald's has $1 billion technology budget, and that's huge. That's like something that can allow McDonald's and allow like the gigantic companies to grow extremely largely. But what about like the individual mom and pop? Is there a way that we could use data to empower those people? And so we initially started with site selection, and created a concept called Ensemble, where it was like a retail real estate matchmaking platform to pair small business owners with the locations in which they'd be most likely to be successful in, with regards to their data, and using their data to make that decision. As we were getting started, we started getting a lot of interest from folks. We're going to different conferences. We learned the most by, going to like literally going to like regional conferences and events where you'd find retailers or you'd find landlords, and just talking with them, trying to put together like we put together fake products, right? Before even writing a single line of code, like put together a demo on an iPad, like using prototyping tools, and said, hey, like we've got this product that we're developing. What do you think about this? And like that was how we iterated. And then, at the time that COVID happened, like retail real estate, at least for a short period of time, like evaporated, right? And everyone that we were talking to told us, hey, like we're not planning on expanding at all for like the rest of this year. So like stop talking to me. And so, that kind of forced us to to really take a critical look at, what we were doing. Like, did we want to wait for this opportunity to open back up again later this year? Like, who knows when COVID would be done with, right? At least in the spring of 2020. Or did we want to find something that, perhaps could help these same like business owners, these restaurateurs faster, without some of the, the challenges that, as we went along, we'd uncovered with our initial idea. And so as we were spinning on, ideas that summer and that fall, we came across sauce. And, in our typical approach, we kind of do this iterative testing thing where we'll, act like we have a product, tell it to a bunch of people, see if they're like, see if it bites, see if it, gets at the hypothesized problem that we saw people having. And sauce just ended up actually kind of growing faster than we'd ever seen from an interest standpoint. And we got folks to, to sign up for beta programs and all of that before we even built the product. And so we're like, okay, well, now we've got people who are signed up. Let's go and build this thing. And it was along the same veins of, using data to help people grow their business in smarter ways, but more on the, actual day-to-day performance side, performance of your restaurant as opposed to site selection. And so that's a little bit on how we got to where we are now, but certainly very different in the beginning.
Colin, what was it like that moment where you it sounds like you started with a wedge site selection and it got a good response. Seems like there was like some challenges, and then you ended up like evolving the product to address a different pain point, and then all of a sudden the product was getting pulled out of your hands. What was that experience like for you? When you kind of, oh wow, we landed on like the thing, like, oh, this is the white hot center, this is what product market fit looks like. What was that feeling like?
Yeah. I mean, initially terrible and then great. Terrible when we were, finding out that just site selection wasn't going to exist for a while. That wasn't fun at all. I had kind of an automated email cadence going out, and it was a thing where we were about to launch, right? And it was like March of 2020. And, first email goes out and everyone's like, great, sign me up, like scheduling meetings. This is awesome. Second email goes out, and that's like as COVID is starting to happen, and folks are like, hey, can we push this back a little bit? I'm not entirely sure. We've got to like figure things out on our side. Third email goes out and it's like, hey, rather than meeting next week, let's meet in like 2 months or so. As you can see, like the situation is extremely like really affecting us. And, some people are already telling us that they're canceling their like expansion plans for the rest of the year. And then I was in a grocery store at the time when I started receiving email replies because I'd forgotten to turn off like the fourth email. And so like that, it automatically sent out, and it sent out to everybody that didn't respond to the first, second, or third ones. And literally I remember looking down at my phone, and I had the whole like quarantine mask on, and it was like clearly COVID at this point. And the email was like, for the love of God, Colin, don't ever talk to me again. Like, my business is falling apart. Like, this is like, I can't believe you want to, you think I'm going to expand right now. Right. And so like literally our entire product direction that we were going in like evaporated. And then that was pretty crushing. At the same time, obviously it was a crushing for everybody across the world who is going through just the effects of COVID. But we knew we had to do something else, and we iterated on a bunch of different ideas. Sauce isn't the first next idea that we came across. We had a bunch of different ideas, and with each of them, we throw them at, we test our hypothesis about particular, like similar tangential, problems that folks had, and, test whether a solution would be something people would tug on. Some of them got a little bit of traction, got some folks to to speak with us. At some point we were like, touring around LA with like the LA Dodgers and like Applebee's on a similar like kitchen concept. Still in the real estate space, still in the data space, kind of emerged between Ensemble and a little bit further than that. But, it kind of got to a place where it was stalling. And we were like, okay, well, we're not entirely sure like how quickly this is going to grow. Like maybe we should try something new. And at that point, we decided to put some feelers out for sauce, and then we started getting responses, and those responses turned into demos. Those demos turned into signups. Those signups turned into, oh, wait, we need to actually go build a product. So and then the product turned into, initial early results, which allowed us to raise a couple $1 million for our seat. So it kind of happened really quickly there. But yeah, complete turnaround of events.
It's a dope story.
Yeah.
And I love hearing the iterative. I mean, I resonate so deeply with that process, Colin. And kudos to you, like being able to find like a scientific method for discovering product market fit. Like I think we do a similar thing with these small businesses. It's like, oh, let's test a problem by mocking it up in Figma and taking some screenshots or some like a rough prototype and act like it's a product and show it to some potential customers in a store and see how they respond. And you can go from thing to thing to thing until it's like, they're like, that one, I want that one. That one helps with my pricing. Oh, that one helps with, you can receive inventory on this. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Tell me more. I would imagine what you have already found is what we're finding as well is there's with brick and mortar businesses as a whole, there seems to be not just even any one problem that they're facing. There's like several problems at any given time. As you conquer one problem, then they grant you the permission to, oh, wow, okay. Well, why don't you solve this other problem that we have? I think that's what we saw with our first thing that we built like an ordering app. And we iterated through a few different like failed concepts and like through that method of like, well, let's design something, make a really ugly prototype and put it in front of a few customers. A few rounds of that failed, and then we landed on this ordering thing, and that our first person who actually like saw the mock there was like, yeah, you need to build that. I would pay you $300 a month for that. And I think that was when we were like, oh, you would pay for this? That's useful. And then a couple others, and we say, well, like, a couple others, how much would you pay for this? We'd pay X $100 a month. Okay, great. And we built that. I don't know, like 17 days after we start building, just super scrappy thing, put it in the hands of somebody, and they're like, wow, I have goosebumps. I've never had an ordering experience this easy. And we're like, oh my God, we may have something. And then that's when we got a whole bunch of stores on that. Our first one, first order of $200 worth of kombucha on the app, placed by Abby, who was the director at Duluth Market. She now is on our team full time as our first hire. And she's been amazing. And then we scaled like 10 stores, and then 50, and then 100, and then 300, and then 600. But in the course of doing all of that, that's when a bunch of the stores starts. You're handling our ordering piece. Is there any way you could connect that with our back office inventory? Could you connect that with our point of sale? Could you connect that with, we're dealing with our invoices, we're running into pricing challenges. Oh gosh, we have e-commerce. We don't know it's just so many things. And then that's what led us to like, all right, we just got to the stores basically asked, could you build the whole end-to-end operating system for the grocery store? And so we've in the past year basically been on this very, very large scope, ambitious project of building like the end-to-end system. And we've just launched it in our first couple stores, and it's exciting. But yeah, you start to piece together the puzzle pieces of these various problems, and then you end up getting this whole picture. It's fun and exciting.
Yeah, and the common thread across both of you shared is that both of you had to really dive all the way in and develop a real deep, intimate knowledge of not so much your products, which, like you said, at various times didn't even exist yet, but really about your customer and the problems and the challenges that they're facing in order to be able to serve them well. And that allowed you to iterate into and will continue to evolve into whatever Sauce and Vori will be, over the future. I'm curious if you can share, both of you share a little bit about where your companies are now and whatever key milestones are important for you and what you're excited about. Obviously, no one knows what the future holds, but maybe just for the remainder of this year of 2023, what's on the horizon for each of you and your companies based on where you are now?
Cool. I think I can start with that. I would say we're a little bit earlier than Vori here. So we're still like kind of validating our proof of concept for one of the new products that we launched in the fall last year. And so we got to a place where like we built this pricing engine for restaurants. It worked in some cases. In other cases, people didn't trust it, and we were like, okay, well, why don't they trust it? And what we found out was that they didn't quite understand it. And dynamic pricing, what we're doing is sometimes it's like a difficult and challenging thing to understand. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board of, well, how can we get people to understand this better? Which led to us kind of building an entirely new product that made it really easy to control prices at scale and dynamically. And so giving people the controls was something that we found really went a long way. And, having people have that light bulb moment of, oh, okay, this is how this works, as opposed to, just like an AI engine, like going and changing my prices automatically due to some like black box data, right? Nobody wants to not know what's going on with their business. And so we cleared a lot of things up there, launched a product in the fall, ended up, targeting some of the major like enterprise restaurant chains because we saw them reaching out to us saying, hey, like we also have this problem as well where we're trying to be more profitable in this digital world. Like, can you help us? And so ended up showing a really good success case with a kind of mid-market chain out of Ohio. And they had about 50 or so locations, and they literally ended up doubling their margins through onboarding onto our system. And we started some more trials with additional like large enterprises, and now we're getting some of the like largest national chains in the country to reach out saying like, hey, we're looking at something like this. Can you guys help us do dynamic pricing? And so we're at this interesting inflection point where we scaled and closed like one really big enterprise deal. We still are very passionate about the SMBs. And so we started two partnerships, one with another technology company in the space, but then also one with a major delivery company to go and resell our product to small businesses. And so, we're at a place where I would say there's a lot of like seeds that have been kind of laid in the in the soil here that are really quickly turning into pretty big opportunities for us. But we're still early. We'll see how things play out. But so far, it's looking like different from when we first started Sauce. It's looking like the industry is now like really ready to prioritize these smarter approaches to being able to manage their menus and manage their prices and engage in something like dynamic pricing, which when we first got started, wasn't something that a lot of the like major enterprises or were kind of really excited about. Now they are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Colin. What about you, Brandon? Where is Vori today? And I know you shared a little bit about how many stores you're at, but what are you thinking about for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, so that was we started with this lightweight app that got essentially, think of it as like a free product that we distributed to a bunch of stores to learn how they work. And Then what ended up happening was we pivoted and extended that product to build what we have now. So with the full, what we call the Vori OS, the Vori operating system, that is, that's your checkout, that's your payment processing, that's your inventory management. We have just installed our first. We're doing our first. We'll just installed our first customer. We're doing our second customer as we speak. Just in the past 3 weeks of this brand new product, collecting the case studies and like seeing the delta. And I think what we really want to we'd be very happy this year. Like, we raised our Series A in August, led by Factory, really dope young firm in Menlo Park, and along with Greylock and Clear Ventures in that round. But we're headed towards Series B. I think the top thing in our mind as like one of the checkpoints between now and Series B is getting our first cohort of extremely happy customers running on the end-to-end system, where the customers are just like, wow, this is making my business make more money and it's making me more profitable, and we're able to measure that. So right now it's like dead set on getting our first 10 screaming happy, jumping up and down customers, like, wow, I'm glad I switched from my old legacy system to Vori. And then from there, that jump starts the rest of our kind of plans. There's, generally by Series B, you want to be, there's different benchmarks anywhere between $3 and $10 million in ARR. And, we just want revenue, rather. I'll just say revenue. And it's, really showing the beginnings of the business is starting to work. So before we see that type of revenue growth, it's just getting these core customers, these first customers on this end-to-end system really, really happy. And that sometimes requires a lot of bedside manner, like we still in the stores. We go to the stores, we bring donuts to the stores. Like, hey, we're going to train you guys on X, Y, and Z. Or like, can you guys train us on like what's wrong with the product? Or like, how can we improve the process of installing this technology? Or hey, what would you like us to tweak about this? And just constant learning from these early guys. It's all about, YC says a lot, and we definitely take to heart. Like, sometimes you do things that don't scale in the early days of a product, no matter what scale you're at, just to kind of make it work and make it fit to the customer's like actual needs. So that's the focus. Small group of insanely happy customers, and we have a way to go there. But once we do that unlocks the next stage of our plan.
That's awesome. Sounds really exciting. I mean, I'm thinking back to the beginning of both of your companies, starting at a very interesting time in the world, but it was also a very interesting time to be a Black founder and a Black CEO, particularly for both of you, being successful in raising money to launch your venture. And over the last few years, particularly since 2020, if you just read the headlines or gloss over social media, it seems like there's money all over the place for Black-owned companies and Black entrepreneurs to find opportunity and to get funding and to launch. And some folks did experience that, and some folks didn't. But I think sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between the illusion of what it's like to raise money over the last few years and what it was actually like. So can both of you share a little bit about what your fundraising journeys have been, and if your identity and the identity of your team played any significant role in any successes or opportunities as well as challenges that you faced trying to do that?
Sure, I can start here. So I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like, I don't know. There's always like the space is so scattered that it's hard to really see. It's hard to really see like, oh, this is how things work this way, because like somebody else fundraises in an entirely different way than you. In my experience, I think it had been easier to raise, certainly easier to raise millions of dollars than to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. which is like one of those counterintuitive things where, when you're first getting started, like you want to be able to get like a proof of concept going. Like you want to be able to support yourself and your co-founder. Maybe you need like a couple 100K, or like at least just something to allow you to first, like, pay yourselves and survive, and like actually get something off the ground, but then also like pay for any like R&D or development or any like engineering or research that you need to do. And so, when we were first raising, like our first time raising took longer than like our actual seed raise, and that was going out to everybody that we know that could potentially have money and saying like, hey, we're working on this idea, would love to share more with you about it. We also have an opportunity to invest. Another counterintuitive thing that we learned is that you don't go and ask people for money. You go and give them the opportunity, right? And so, and investors don't want to. A lot of investors don't want to invest in somebody who needs money, counterintuitively. So it's like you want to present like, hey, this thing is going to take off, and like you're gonna, like, if you don't invest, you're gonna miss the boat, right? And so, anyway, the first folks that we initially raised from were our friends and our family members, like family friends. Some family friends were doctors, and we're like, hey, is this something that they're interesting to you? And doctors have a lot of money. The very first person that I met, or that invested in us, was somebody that I actually met on an airplane. Completely like random encounter. I was coming back from a flight from Europe over to Atlanta, and I saw this guy who was just knocking back like vodka orange juices, and I was like, "Huh, this is interesting." And he just ordered like another one after another one after another one. And he commented on a book that I was reading, and I think I was reading like Ben Graham's like Intelligent Investor or something like that. And he's like, "Oh, I love that book." And we started talking about books, and then started talking about other things. Turns out like this guy is a contractor in the Middle East, working on like some IT contract gigs, and he lives in Atlanta. And he was super interested in what I was doing. I was going to go work and build self-driving cars for the next year at GM Cruise. And so we just stayed in touch, and like literally when we went to raise, I literally emailed everybody that I knew, was like, hey, I'm taking this next step, quitting my job, going to work on this thing. And he's like, oh, this thing looks really interesting, let's like chat more. And so ended up chatting, ended up investing. But overall, that time for us took, I would say, when we first got started, maybe a little less than 2 months, or maybe like a little less or a little over 2 months or whatever, to raise like an initial 500K. Initially, it was like none of it was from VCs at all. It was all from angels. And then we had a fortuitous like VC come and put some money in at the very end. When we raised the second time around, targeting larger VCs, that happened a lot faster. And so our seed, I think we raised it in a little over 4 weeks, maybe 4 to 5 weeks or so. And that was, a little over $3 million. And I think, going back to the earlier point, I think one of the reasons why at least we found it easier to raise more, obviously that's a different market than there is now. Easier to raise millions of dollars than hundreds of thousands of dollars, is that, sometimes it requires talking to 100 people or 150 people in order to like get somebody to say yes, right? And there are people who will, be really interesting, who you want to invest in you, and like no matter what you're building, even if you have, the next Facebook or the next like, super like multi-billion-dollar, startup company. There'd be people that will just not invest in you just because they don't believe in what you're doing at all, or they don't invest in that space. Like you just have to figure out like, okay, are they somebody who just generally invests in this space that I'm building in? And then obviously like, do they like my approach here? Do they like me? Do they trust me here? And not everyone's going to be that person. But in our experience, it was easier to find and go talk to, a bunch of like not publicly listed, but like just outward facing VCs where you could go and like actually build a list of 150. Like we actually just have like this list of 150 plus VCs, right? That we will go and, try and talk to. Easier to go do that than 150 rich people who are willing to put in like tens of thousands or put in like $100,000 for your company. So, long way of saying we've kind of had a nuanced experience with funding, but I don't necessarily. I mean, maybe you could say that like being a Black American did affect like the funding experience. I think it did. At the same time, I've seen friends, depending on the space that you're working in, like one of my friends just raised money for an AI company, and like before even having like a pitch deck together, people were giving him millions of dollars, right? And so, I think it really just depends on what you're building, you and the approach. But I think, for everyone, you should probably prepare to speak to like over 100 people. And in that process, it's, you'll get to learn a lot. You'll get to figure out the necessary problems with your business and improve them. But after speaking to 5 people, like you'll iterate. After speaking to the next 5, the next 10, you'll iterate, right? And oftentimes it's hard to really reach 100 no's, right? Like if you speak to enough people, like somebody is going to eventually say yes. And so our approach has always been like, just take that magnitude approach here and obviously grow along the way.
I co-sign everything Colin said, honestly, not even much more to add. I'll say 3 things. One, I do recognize, like, as a straight cis male founder that is Black, there is privilege even in that. And also, honestly, there's also university privilege, specifically in this domain. Like, I think, Colin's nodding, the MITs, the Stanfords just have that halo of like tech, and that helps. I think, being a Black woman founder from, Alcorn State University is just the challenges that she would overcome are way higher than those that I would overcome with equal capabilities and equally strong, like, concept and traction, 100%. So I think there is intersectionality in that for sure. And so I recognize that, but I definitely see on a whole. So therefore, on the whole, I can't really ever point to a point in time fundraising where it's been like an actively racially hostile experience, is the reason why I say that. But we know what the math says, and the math says is, in the partner meetings, we know that disparaging comments are made. We know that we make, I think the report just came out, 0.69% of all venture capital goes to Black founders. We know all the stats. They are frustrating. And, we have to just, what do we have to do? We have to carve our way out of no way, unfortunately. But, that being said, just the experience fundraising for anybody is, honestly, it's super intuitive and it's super like insider specific, like knowing the right people, getting into the right networks, asking for the right introductions. I think there are maybe some organizations, I'd say, like, in my experience, honestly, a lot of people like to hate on Y Combinator. I really do appreciate Y Combinator for it does feel most democratic in terms of you literally apply. And, if you're a strong thinker, you're a hustler, you have a decent idea or a decent traction, like, you get in, and then they give you the networks and teach you the playbooks. Like, that helped me on my first company big time, and my co-founders big time. But I don't think I don't see a lot of institutions like that in Silicon Valley that are just like come one, come all. It's more so, oh yeah, I was in the fraternity with that guy when at Yale, and so then he brought me into this firm, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, how do you get to know them? If it becomes non-deterministic, which inherently creates barriers to entry. I really would love to see more institutions. Like if RBS rolled out a venture fund, that would be crazy. We'd love to see that. I'd love to see you roll out a venture arm, Ray. Like that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about that breaks the whole thing open, And then you just need a couple of us to really return the fund. Like that's what we need is a few of us to return funds. I think we all know what it means to return a fund for the audience that's listening. We need one of us to go out and honestly have an exit of $10 billion, okay, or more. That all of a sudden the fund who bet on that, and particularly in this case, we're talking about Black founder, is like, oh, when I bet on Black people, they can make me money. That's the feedback loop that we need. But it's a little bit of chicken and egg, right? Well, you can't have that unless there's enough of us that are funded. But I guess just like how we desegregated any other major industry in the States, baseball, basketball, music, politics, like there's going to be maybe Colin Robinson of tech startups, right? If he can be the one or among the few that are going to break forth and build that decacorn or that centacorn, and then it creates a halo effect for all the rest of us that are coming up underneath them, So I think we do need that for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Brandon's saying, and I think there certainly needs to be more dedication to Black, underrepresented women and women founders, right? Because it shouldn't, like my earlier comment of like, hey, it's a numbers game. I still do believe in, like, if there's 0.6% of VC money going to Black founders, then you've got to work within what the land looks like. And if that means you have to talk to 150 people to go and get a yes, then do that. And it's going to be harder, but it shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to be the way where, okay, you have to build this list of 100 to 150 people to talk to. And, Mr. like straight white guy who, has, went to Harvard or went to MIT as well, only has to talk to 5 people. It shouldn't be that way at all, right? And so, I think there certainly has to be, groups who are dedicated and who see this tremendous mismatch in opportunity, who try and solve that. And so, I'd love for RBS to do that. We ended up taking money from Harlem Capital. They did that, and I think that groups like that are going to be really powerful, and there's data that shows that they're going to perform better too, just because they are considering a much broader market of people, right?
Yeah, most definitely. You both are just talking about the general challenges of, I think a lot of us in the multiple areas of our lives, at least as scholars, at least in universities that we're fortunate to have attended, and being in that point, in a fraction of the 1% that raises money, you are both excited about the hustle and know that you've earned every piece of it, and are wanting to forge your path, and you also can't exist in that space without thinking about everybody else who's not in that fraction of the 1%. And as we wrap up, I'm wondering, both of you could just share a little bit about how you view success with your ventures. And I don't mean if we have both of you have a tremendous exit and it puts everybody else on, and financially, sure, you may have some metrics there, but I know that you care deeply about your own success. You care deeply about the success of your customers, which is not always the case with every business that actually cares about how well they do. And then you're also thinking about the folks that you want to bring up with you. Take me into your mind when those thoughts are floating as you're jumping between meetings, as you're jumping between, different iteration sessions or prototypes. What are you aiming for with this? And what would a job well done look like for both of you?
Well, thank you for the beautiful question. For me, it's one thing, and it's how can we widen the aperture of opportunity for our customers, and that goes back to the stuff that Colin was saying so eloquently about um, like empowering this class of businesses that are often overlooked. Um, but it's also widening the aperture of opportunity for our communities. Like we all know, any founder that's underrepresented, whether they're indigenous or trans or Latino, Latina, like we all women founders know that they're inherently building not just to make their customers succeed, not just so they can be successful, but that they are like um, they're trying to cleave an opening in the otherwise asymptote that sits over the heads of like the rest of the group that they represent. Okay. And so like trying to pierce through that like barrier of possibility is literally what we have to do, because it's like, if we fail, it's representative of the group. So it's like we got to win so that we can like help the rest of the group come up. And so it's really about like, um, yeah, one of us eat, we all eat.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say on I can speak both on the business side and then on the personal side. On the business side, similar to Brandon, really about empowering a lot of these extremely hardworking businesses. Some of the hardest working, like, people across the world are these folks that start these like small businesses, and you've got to manage everything. Like, you've got to manage everything. You've got to build from nothing, right? And so, being able to, and I love data. I love like solving data problems, and so being able to use and leverage like these cutting edge data and AI and tech tools to help those folks, and to really like democratize that access, democratize that scalability, that performance upgrade that the best of the best have, like the Amazons have and whatnot. Um, I think that's going to be extremely powerful. And so that's our that's what we want out of this, from a business standpoint. Um, and then from a personal standpoint, I mean, I think I've like gotten a chance to serve on the board of MIT for 5 years now, and you know in that role, you meet a lot of people who I would say at some point kind of unlocked their capacity to like build and do things for the world. And like what I mean by that is like they figured out a way to, I don't know if you call it retiring or if you call it like, have enough just kind of revenue that's just keeping you alive, that you can really just work on anything that you want at any given time and help like whoever you'd like to help, and have a network to go and build and solve problems for people around the world. I love to be able to have that. And so I like to, sometimes personally, I like to think of things in terms of like lifetimes, right? And if you look at someone like, um, if you look at like a billionaire, for example, a billionaire with their entire like net worth, whatever you call it, could actually like provide for thousands of people, like thousands of people throughout their entire lifetime, right? Which is insane. Like actually insane, an amount of like impact that you can have, and that's like being able to provide like the income of someone throughout an entire like 80 years of life here. And so I think there's a lot of power in being able to um, use like your personal capability, like network resources to help others. And I'd love to be able to kind of get to the place in my life where I can unlock that and, you know, actually be able to spend my time doing that as opposed to spend my time figuring out how I can provide for myself. And I think a lot of us are, at this place where, you live life and you've got to continue to work for your next paycheck. Right. And that's important and being able to provide for yourself and your family. But I'd love to, personally be able to have an impact and be able to spend my time providing for thousands or millions of people at some point, with the work that I'm doing. So, yeah.
Well said, guys. I mean, I think across for both of you, what success looks like, a theme that is clear, which is no surprise, is lifting as you climb, which is Ron Brown to the core. That's what we're all about. And that's what the program did for us when we were 17, 18-year-olds in high school. And the reason why they did that is because they knew you two and everybody else, the rest of us, would all go out and do that in the world. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Value of One, The Power of All, a podcast created by the Ron Brown Scholar Program. If you want to hear more inspiring conversations like this one, don't forget to click subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about the organization, check us out at ronbrown.org.